Nina. Thanks so much for joining me for a brand new Studio Monday video. Today I want to focus on a technique that I'm calling multi-level stamp layering. And I'm going to be using some products from Hero Arts to create this effect. I'm calling this multi-level stamp layering because we're going to be creating a level underneath of our stamp layering die cut images to create a more interesting and realistic appearance instead of having them popped up off of the panels that you see here of the little underwater scene. I'll get to that in a minute. First, let's talk about the stamp sets that I'll be using today. I've got the Water Lilies stamp layering set and the coordinating dies. Both are from Hero Arts. They actually come with a set of inks as well when you buy the collection. You've got Butter Bar, Red Royal, Bubblegum, and Soft Pink. And these are all the mini ink cubes of Hero Arts' hybrid ink collection. I'm also going to be incorporating this new stamp set from Hero Arts. It's called You Are Loved. I'm going to be using this for one of the sentiments on my cards. And I wanted to show you because this is a really great stamp set that features a ton of different sentiments that you can use on so many different cards. It's one of my favorite sentiment sets. Alright, so let's get started on the stamp layering. I want to show you here how I went ahead and started off by stamping the water lilies onto some cardstock. I'm using my Misty stamping tool so that way I can get these positioned really easily, and I'll be able to double stamp if I want to, which I will be doing as I go further along with the stamping. To line up the water lily image from this stamp set, I found it was easiest to line it up with that middle petal that you see peeking out from the bottom of the actual flower itself. I'll show you here the close-up look that I have here, where you see the two corners of that bottom petal that's coming down from the entire flower. Those 2 points are a great guide for where you're going to line it up on the image underneath. So I found that that was the best way to be able to line this image up because this is a very odd shape. So you need to find something that's really going to be a good guide for what you're going to be stamping. So I'm going to ink up the first layer with the soft pink ink. And the second layer I have here, I'm inking this one up in the bubble gum. And this is one of the things I love about Hero Arts' mini ink cube sets, is that when they're paired up with some of their stamp layering images, it's a collection that's perfectly designed to coordinate together for the stamp layering images that it goes with. So the pinks and reds here work perfectly for the water lilies, and then of course they also have the yellow for the center of the flower. I used the Red Royal for that final third layer, and then I also brought in, like I said, the Butter Bar, and I'm going to ink that up in the center of the flower. So our flower is completely built. We need other images now to go with our flower. So I actually stamped quite a few of all of these images. I stamped 4 of everything. So that way I could be able to use 2 of everything on each card. And you'll see why in a minute. I'm moving on to stamping the large lily pads. For the lily pads, I used a combination of lime green, green apple, and pine, and I mixed and matched them depending on what lily pad I was trying to stamp. For the smaller ones, there's only 2 layers, so in some cases I would stamp the lime green and the green apple, and then in other cases I would stamp the green apple with the pine for the smaller water lilies. For the closed water lily that you see here, I'm stamping this one in purple. I'm going to be using a few purple shades. One of them is from Simon Says Stamp. The others are from Hero Arts. And for those of you that are really interested in seeing what colors I use for everything, I do have all of that information listed out over at the blog, so make sure you check that out. The link is in the video description or at the end of this video. So I'll continue stamping all of these images until I have, like I said, 4 of everything, and I stamped them on a few different pieces of paper. I'm now taking the dies and putting them into my Big Shot machine with some micro pour tape, and I'm going to run them through so that I can cut out all these images. And you can see that, of course, just like any die, these cut out perfectly with a nice white outline around them. If you want to get rid of the white outline, you could definitely fussy cut these, but I like the white die cut outline. I think it just looks nice. Alright, so now it's time to work on arranging these flowers. So I have my little phone here. I'm going to snap a picture of this arrangement that I've created on this card. This is going to be the guide for where the final placement of all of these flowers and lily pads will be. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those off of my panel here. This is a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel, but I will trim it down. This is where I'm creating the window, so to speak, for where my images are going to end up resting on my card. So instead of creating a full panel that'll have the water background on it, and then popping up the images off of that panel. Instead, I'm going to take the images, first inlay them into this arrangement that I'm creating, following the guide that I have on my phone. I'm going to use that as the inlay area for the first layer of my stamped images. Then I will add additional images on top of that with foam tape. And this will make sense as we continue to go along. But as you can see, I'm following the guide and creating the negative, so to speak, of where my images will finally rest. So I'm taking a stitched rectangle die here and I'm going to trim this panel down so it's slightly smaller than an A2 size card. I'm going to attach this to a stencil from Hero Arts. This is a really pretty wave stencil, and I thought it worked really nice for creating the look of water. Since these are water lilies, of course, they end up sitting in water. I'm going to create the water by using a few different Hero Arts dye inks. I'm using an ink blending tool to apply the ink onto the stencil, and I'll continue adding the different colors. I've got Mint Julep, Aegean, and Aquatic. I'm going to be sponging these in kind of a random fashion across this panel, making sure I use a very heavy hand because I want this to be quite intense. I'm also not worried too much about making sure I don't have any little ink sponged areas because these lines are very delicate on the stencil, so they're really not going to show through. If I have an area where I've gotten too heavy and it's noticeable, if like I was doing this on an ink blended background and there was no stenciled pattern, you'd notice it a lot more if you had an area where you apply the sponge too heavy. But in this particular case, it didn't need to be applied super carefully because we're using a stencil and it's so delicate. I'm taking a few of those inks now, just kind of really buffing over top of that ink color that's there. That's just softening it a little bit and adding some color to the background. I popped up the panel using some foam tape, cover the entire piece, and then I will go ahead and turn it over onto my A2 sized card made from white cardstock and pop that up off of the card. Now it's time to work on gluing my first layer of images inside the negative portion of my die cut arrangement. I'm using some PPA matte adhesive and I'm going to apply that adhesive to the back side of all of these images and start adhering them down. I'm applying the images that are going to be in the back of my arrangement first. So in this case, the water lily flower will be on the top of this lily pad and this closed water lily. So I want to make sure that I have those two images applied down first before I apply the flower. I'll continue working this way until I have all the images adhered down in the negative areas of this panel. Once the images were adhered, I can now move on to adding my second layer of images. And basically this is going to create the look of the images being popped up off of that watery background that we've created. But instead of them being popped up off of the background and you seeing the background showing up underneath, this almost grounds the images a little bit more and gives them a little bit more of a dimensional feel. It creates a very different look, and I really like how it turns out. It does require some extra steps to be able to create the extra images and die cut into that panel, but I think the result is totally worth it, and I really love how it looks. So as you can see here, as I turn this, you can see the great dimension that we get from the images being popped up off of the images underneath. I think, like I said, this is a really cool technique to be able to use for certain cards. If you want to create a little bit more of an extra special look, this is certainly a way to do it. Alright, so now that I've got my images adhered down to my panel, I'm going to start stamping some sentiments onto some pink cardstock that matched the darkest colors of the water lily really nicely. I'm using one of the sentiments from the You Are Loved stamp set from Hero Arts. The other sentiment I ended up using was from the Water Lily stamp set. I heat embossed both sentiments in that pink cardstock with some white embossing powder, and then I lined them up along the right-hand side of the bottom portion of the card. This balances out the entire layout nicely. For some final detailing, I am using some beautiful Pretty Pink Posh clear droplets in both the large and the small size. I'm adhering them down with some glossy accents because the glossy accents is clear. For some smaller dots, I'm using the Glossy Accents bottle itself, and I'm going to just drop a few small drops of the Glossy Accents into the background to act as bubbles. Finally, I'm using a Wink of Stella clear glitter pen and adding some glitter over certain areas of each image. This is totally optional, but I really like how it really darkens up the coloring of the flowers really nicely and just adds a nice little bit of sparkle. So here's a look at the two cards side by side, and you can see they both look pretty much similar, but you do have different sentiments here. And of course, the layouts aren't exactly the same, and the stamp layering is a little bit different as well. But you can see the great dimension that we have here from these cards, and really this adds a great bit of interest to your card design, and again, grounds the images really nicely. So I hope this video has inspired you to try doing some multi-layer stamp layering of your own. Even if you don't do stamp layering, you could do multi-layer die cutting such as we did here to create some unique dimensional effects to the images on your card. If you liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more inspiration. Here are 2 more that you might find interesting. Thanks again for stopping by and spending some time with me. I will see you again soon, and have a fabulous day.